All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the August 2nd of 2024 AgRobotics Working Group meeting. To start off, I'll remind everybody that next week's meeting will be canceled due to the grape grower demo day. So August 9th, no meeting. Hopefully many of us will be able to attend the demo. And then we'll be resuming back on August 16th. For this week, new members, we have Thomas Gwertz from Source.ag, as well as Brian Waddy from Innovate BC. And I don't think either of them are. I knew that Thomas wasn't going to be able to make this first call, but I don't see Brian on there either. So unfortunately, we can't get an introduction from them. All right, and from there, I guess we'll dive right into it. Bridget, I know you prepared a few slides, so if you want to go ahead and share your screen, then we can get going with today's topic. Bridget, you're muted.
There you go. I was so worried about getting the slide sharing down because I'm a little rusty after 11 months. So anyways, can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
And see the slides?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So this is just a quick brainstorming session with the group today because we didn't have a presenter for this morning. So there's two questions that are very high level that I have for the group. I would say at this point in time, these are more kind of like brainstorming ideas, that kind of thing. If you have a yes, but that's not going to work, we will obviously get to that later on as well. But today's is more about if the sky was the limit, aside from a little bit of a time or a space constraint that I threw in there, what kind of things would you want to see? So the first question that I have for the group is, we have an opportunity to create a robotics laboratory at the Grove, which is our agri-food incubator here at Western Fair District. So some of the reasons that we're looking to have something like this tying back to the working group is that youth engagement and knowledge transfer. So connecting to people necessarily in the industry, but also, you know, agriculture gets smaller and smaller and smaller every year as there's less farm kids coming up through the pipeline. So how can we connect the general public or people who are really interested in robotics and that kind of thing to get them as another potential worker for the industry? How can we provide commercialization success for companies that are starting up? And does this tie in for a value add for those companies in and amongst all the research and other work that Chuck and various groups are doing? I'm a very visual person, so I just threw in a few pictures for you guys. So this is from Boston University. This is their Engineering Product Innovation Center. They have a 1,000 square foot center here with a wide variety of different opportunities in robotics. Ours would obviously not be to this level, but it kind of gives a little bit of a visual of some of the things that they have been doing. So without further ado, I'll open up the floor to the group. And I'm just going to move this so I can actually see you guys. And so the floor is open for discussion. Anybody, if you were to envision what a robotics laboratory would look like, what kind of things would you want to see?
So I'm trying to find a picture of it, but when we toured the Farm Droid lab, or one of their headquarter locations, it was really cool what they had. So they only deal with Farm Droid robots, but in their control center of where they deal with things, they had all the different components of the robot put up onto the wall in a working condition, so that when they're on the phone troubleshooting with somebody, they were actually able to go there and mess and play with the different components of it. And as they're walking through someone on the other end of the phone of what to do, they have that there. So some working equipment, obviously, but maybe not in a way that we think, like not necessarily the whole machine, but components maybe built on the wall or something that people can interact with in that way.
Excellent.
When I find that picture, I'll share it.
Something that I would add is we need some indoor GPS capability.
Okay.
So that can be tested, at least the receivers and things can be tested without having to go outside. But we also need to be able to get in and out, depending on the size of what you're bringing in there, easily. So what we don't want to have in the lab is that you've got to go through this door and this sliding door and this rolling door and down this hallway and around this sharp corner. Because that's not easy to deal with. So it's got, it has to be somewhat accessible.
Okay.
And there's a comment from David in the chat about forklift and lifting. So I think either that or some sort of overhead gantry style crane device to be able to hold things up. Because generally when we're working on this stuff, it's awkward. So it's not, there's not always good lifting points. Giving options for stuff like that would be good.
Perfect. We do have a forklift in the facility, so there is that, but the crane idea is a good.
And what I mean, like a 30 by 30 space to navigate a forklift around is probably too small. And because the forklift takes up half that space to be able to move around. And so if you're going to do that, then you need to have something that's more stationary within the realm.
So Chuck, is there something in robotics, like I'm thinking like a car lift, for example? Does something like that exist for robots as well?
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's car lifts, but generally what they'll have is an overhead rack, like an overhead rack, and with a cable coming from the ceiling. That's usually what gives you the most options. Go ahead, Katan.
Hi guys, great idea. Almost an extension to what Chuck is talking about, but is there? Um, I'm in London, so I can see the building, I can see the grove, I can see the parking lots, and all those things. Is there an opportunity to put a large sort of greenhousey-like facility right next door for testing purposes? So it's not just out in the farm forking lift, but there appears to be space there. Can this turn into, test the small facilities, test the small robots inside, and then put them straight out into the field for whether it's picking or weeding or whatever you want to do, but so that immediately whatever's being built can be tested out. So you've got the next phase right there without having to look for a farm or something.
I think we've talked about doing that at the space at Western as well.
Okay.
I've kind of said, hey, we're going to use some of your land if we do this. And at NIO's headquarters in Toulouse, what they have is about 5 acres in behind their shop and facility. They have a small indoor, they have a small hoop house. And the reason why they have the hoop house is that way they can run in the rain, and it doesn't affect the GPS. They can still run outside, and it's big enough. It's about, I don't know, 30 feet wide and about 200 feet long, and it's big enough to run some rows. So they have some stuff sitting out there, and they can do that, and it doesn't look unsightly, right? It's not horribly ugly either.
Yeah.
A lot of what you guys are discussing is pretty much what we have going on in Vineland, right? So I'm actually in our lab right now. And then we've got the greenhouse, orchard, vineyard, all easily accessible. So I always tout the advantage with us is that we can design something, 3D print it in our lab, bring it out to the greenhouse all in one day. So there's a lot of advantage to be able to test on site in a controlled setting. We also have some sort of like fake plants sometimes we use in the lab so that they don't change. So it gives us a nice way to test things before going out and playing with real plants. If there's anything that we can bring in terms of advice to say what works here, like we're happy to link up and provide that.
We will always take advice, especially if you guys have already got something working. That is why reinvent the wheel, right?
Mhm.
I see Jason has his hand up.
Yep, I'm just gonna share those pictures. Oh, I can't. Would you be able to enable share, please?
I th oh, there we go. Okay, I think you're good.
Awesome, thank you. Um,
Just while Jason's doing that, yeah, I've seen the lab there, Brian, at Vineland, and I think it is a good initial template for some of the ideas.
can you guys see this picture?
Yeah, nice.
Mhm.
So here they had 3 screens with a lot of the like the robots where they are, and screens with the weather, the different locations, and then here's the what I was trying to describe of the different components of the robot on the wall. So they're not just displays here; these are actually functioning. And that they mentioned that was extremely helpful for them when helping to troubleshoot and work through some of the challenges of the robots. And then when Chuck was talking about the NIO field there, it reminded me of this picture. So this is
Yes.
another thing about Farm Droid, where they have a lab where they can test a bunch of different things, but then right across the street there, they could actually watch the Farm Droid in the field for those tests. So something like that, perhaps.
Awesome. Thanks for pulling those up, Jason.
No worries.
And if you wouldn't mind just on the side, shooting those over to us in an email so we've got them for reference, that'd be appreciated.
Okay, yep, can do.
I saw in the chat, Giuliano had a note about a small meeting room equipped for presentations. The site where this proposed lab would be is fully equipped for that. So that's all good, no problems there. Katan, you raised your hand again?
Just yeah, just a quick thing to keep in mind, which I'm sure you have, but do not forget, as part of designing this lab, if you're putting lots of equipment and availability, sort of a single data infrastructure. So if anybody's going to be building small robots, don't make it their problem to then have to find out where to upload the data, how to collect it, how to write the scripts. That entire environment of software and data, if possible, build it into the design of the lab. So that if I come in from the outside, then I don't have to worry about bringing my own dev environment, my own data environment, etc. Give it to me ready, willing, available, so that I can just start what I need to do. It gets collected in a central place. There's a code repository. And maybe if I'm tying into Azure or AWS or whatever, that their tools are also available. I get it. It will require some initial cost and setup, but having those services ready for some innovator to come in so they can just start is going to be really, really important versus me as an innovator having to come in and then worry about, where do I code? Where do I collect my data? How do I take it off? All that stuff. Provide that as a service built into the lab. Don't make me work for it later.
Well, I think in our discussions before with the University of Guelph and with Waterloo, that we would probably want to coordinate with organizations like that to make sure that they give us some advice on how that's done.
Yeah, exactly.
And whatever, because we want this linked into the education system too, right?
Yeah.
So we'd probably be looking to people like that for their input on how that's done, or whether they can even provide that kind of service for us. Like, I don't know. So
there will be organizations around, whether it's colleges or universities, etc. Anybody that's got this stuff ready, so it'll be easier for you to bolt into that than having to reinvent it or as an afterthought.
Excellent, thank you. Dan, I'm gonna just jump in for a second. And I will say too, I know that this is just kind of a second week for me and just jumping into this, but it's also just a discussion for us at this point in terms of who do we need to contact to pull in the right resources. And I definitely see this being a discussion that comes up a few more times in the working groups, just so we can kind of ensure that what we're building is going to be useful for what people are looking for. And also, like, as Brian said, if they've got some similar facility as well, like that it's complementary to what's already out in the market, as opposed to making the exact same thing if it's not going to work for what's needed. So I didn't see who was next.
Next up was Jing from Haggerty.
Sounds good. Thanks for giving me this chance to speak. I do want to comment on one of the point I think previously was like getting like the youth and to be interested in growing, right? So I'm just gonna confirm the limitation of this before I give, I think, two ideas I have so far. Is it just the space that is limited? Anything else? Let's say if it's like if you had the Bank of Canada's budget, you could do it, but it's only the 30 feet by 30 feet that is limited. Is that correct?
I think right now I didn't want to put a limit in terms of like, oh, we don't have someone to staff it yet or that kind of thing, because
Okay.
doesn't mean that if the idea comes up today and it's not something that works at Western Fair, that it's not necessarily good for the working group to keep in mind for other projects. The space is just because I know that was kind of the rough space that we have in terms of the current idea.
Yeah.
But it's more just like high level, what's an option, what's the brainstorm that's useful.
Gotcha.
So your ideas are both, you can send them both our way.
Gotcha. So I'll take a stab from just the youth engagement perspective. So I'll share a little bit how I got interested into science. So I'm from like Ottawa, in the Ottawa area. There is a great museum called the Science and Innovation Museum in Ottawa. And it's this flashy museum with a ton of lights, etc. It's a great place. Like there's a ton of pictures of them on Google Images. There's a lot of like steam locomotive you can get in. There's like multiple tools you can touch around. So I'm thinking that if you can fit within that space, you can take a burrow and you can make an obstacle maze. And the goal for the kids is to use the burrow and navigate through that, pull a ship and now put it back and see who's able to beat it in the quickest amount of time. And then the next week you switch your layout out. Or even better, you can have simulations of you like driving different trucks or using different programming different farm droids, right? For example, if you want to use a farm droid, you have to map the field. Perfect. You let the youth get in as a summer camp, point which area you want to map, let it run the simulation. Probably notice that it doesn't work, and then they have to adjust the point of interest, etc. Like these are things that allow them to interact with it. And you might say, okay, this is great for the kids, but what about the actual grower, about the actual companies? Well, it's a great way to get them involved and to see how it will work in basically the model method. And if they're interested, we have the actual machine that can maybe use it if we're going to want to do like the kind of lab and the experimental field out there. So they see how it operates on a like simulation basis, video game basis, and then they say, okay, let's bring in real life, and here's the actual robot. I'm just thinking that would be like pretty cool. It's like, oh, you go from this is what it looks on paper to here it is, the 3 meters wide, 900 kilogram robot ready for you to just touch and just see all over the place. So I think this will be a very interesting way to get the summer camp kids over. And I think like a lot of like the summer camps around London area is also very interested to see what is fresh. And if London Fair could do something like that, it will be like absolutely amazing.
Well, and I think Jing, one of the ideas too that pops around in my head is that, if you have a lab like this where some stuff can be done virtually, and whether it's on one of the innovation farm sites or Tyler talked about some of that land that Guelph has, whether that's where the robots are actually running in real life, on a bigger scale. Like who knows how this is all going to fit together at some point. And where, what is done at each different, like, because we don't need to do everything at one place. It's just a matter of how do we bolt these different pieces together, and where it makes the most sense.
If we could jump in right after Chuck, I do know I'm hoarding a little bit of time, but there are some online kind of like interaction possible. So I think it's like someone who made a code that he runs this mini city with a mini truck, and then people online could connect to that server and drive the truck remotely. That could be something that could do. So you can get kids from Kingston to use and access like the driving component online and see how it fares out, or maybe you can run the simulation online. These are things that are also possible. Anyway, just throwing ideas out there. But I've stolen enough time. Michael has his hand raised, so I'll just stop for now.
Thank you.
Michael, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I don't think I'll say anything completely unique here. But like, here's my perspective as somebody who's been doing engineering for a while, but first time in ag. So that's the angle I approach it from. I've got enough experience to know how to put together like hardware kits. Like I think that the hardware setups, we got pictures of like an HIL setup. That's cool. The thing that is most challenging for me is somebody coming from a background where I know that, but I don't know the agricultural knowledge, and I don't have access to the agriculture environments to do the testing so that the solutions we build actually solve the real world problems that farmers are experiencing, right? And so the comment that came up before about having a greenhouse was, I think, along those lines. Having access to people that are growing crops and can even like just help educate those of us that are trying to help in the space to say like, these are the problems we're having, like here's how the crops work. Like we're thinking over the winter here, like anybody that was at the demo day a few weeks ago saw this little tree setup that we had with the robot poking the apples. Like we're lucky that we have an orchard where I can actually go to access this kind of environment and information. If we didn't have it, and even now that we do going into the winter, I'm sitting here thinking like, how am I going to make substantial progress over the next like 6 to 8 months when it's cold outside and there's no crops, so that I'm not wasting all that time, right? Because a lot of the other stuff like GPS navigation and so on is like a relatively solved problem that I'm probably not going to be iterating a lot on over the winter. I want to work on the agricultural angle. So supporting people coming in with, whether it's a greenhouse or even just a smaller scale area set up, people that are knowledgeable that can help set up some analog crops or small scale real crops so that people can make progress on that stuff, the real nitty gritty of the agricultural side. That's the biggest one for me. Like tech's used to big like really fast feedback cycles, and ag is terrible for that, is what I'm learning.
Well, and I'm thinking, Michael, like this is where, the space at Western is going to serve a certain use case, but this is where we would need more area. And something like this, if we had unlimited budget, okay, and again, Bridget's talking about, what's the sky, what can you build somewhere to have these things year round to speed up that iteration cycle? Because that's one of the most common issues that we come up against in testing this. Like in the greenhouse space, when we're doing greenhouse equipment, generally it's climate controlled year round. And so that iteration process can somewhat happen more rapidly. But how do we do that with an apple tree? How do we do that with an asparagus plant? And how do we do that with a corn plant? And is there a way to build something relatively cost effective that, whether it's mock plants, whether it's real plants or whatever, we have some space for that. And and a greenhouse might not be the best design. Like it could just be a giant drive shed. I don't know that, but I mean, this is where, but that's a great idea. And depending on where we have land and where we have space, that's something that I think could be useful to the ag industry specifically, that's separate from the automotive robotics industry or whatever.
Exactly.
Bridget?
Honestly, a lot of what you guys are talking about is what we have at Vineland and are building out further as we work with more companies.
So I guess 2 questions to that, Brian, and because I'm new here, you guys may have already done tours there, but have we had a tour recently of the center that you have there?
I don't know when the last time, the majority of people on this group have been here. But certainly some of the people on this call even have been here pretty recently. And we're always open to that. We're always
Okay.
happy.
That was my next question. Is that something that you might be like, maybe that's another event that we look at having, is just a tour and a little discussion with people that are closer by. That can be another event. Because I think too, if it's indoors, it would be a good off-season one.
Yes, no, certainly. And so there's the Canadian Greenhouse Conference, October 9th and 10th this year.
Okay.
And there is some kind of open house. I don't know, Evan, if you know, it's not with our program directly in the technology, but it could be used to sort of tag along. we are hoping to get, so we've talked about demoing our cucumber harvesting robot as well for this group. And I think some of you, I know, Kristen has sort of been like, when's it gonna happen? Give us a date. So we're working towards something like that as well. We can potentially use that as a central theme to also get everyone out here to take a look at the facilities. But no, just reach out to us. It can be me, Evan on the call, Dan Bath as well. We're all happy to sort of work with our communications team as well to organize something. We do them all the time. We get groups coming in and out of Vineland all the time, so it should be no problem.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll connect with you after the call to chat about some options. And going back to the discussion earlier, has anybody seen the Dairy Farmers of Ontario shipping container with the milking parlor inside it? So when you guys were talking about things that could be mobile, now obviously a shipping container is not the easiest because it's like we need a crane to offload it, but that's an idea that they have built a complete De Laval shipping, like a milking robot, not a robot, but a milking system inside a shipping container. So for all the fairs, and we'll have it here at Western Fair, and I can send you guys some pictures, but that's their way of essentially moving the milking parlor around from all the small fairs to showcase the technology that they use. And when you guys were talking earlier, that again, what are your thoughts on, I don't know, a shipping container is necessarily feasible, but some sort of mobile, if it's for youth or if it's for startup companies, that is something that could be maybe moved to multiple locations. Because then it's not stuck with infrastructure in one spot. So I guess open that up for your feedback and that kind of thing.
Don't everybody jump at once.
Maybe this is kind of around you here. Just a quick thing, if maybe something to keep in mind, is this a for-profit or a not-for-profit model? Because that's going to govern a lot of how you go start thinking about it, right? So if it's purely not-for-profit, then it'll drive a certain level of decision making versus for-profit. So I don't know if a decision's been made about that or not.
It hasn't yet. I obviously, like, Western Fair is a not-for-profit. However, we would need to make sure that whatever we end up with is sustainable. So
Yeah.
I don't think that you're going out there expecting to like charge up, you know, like a ton for or something like that, but it would need to cover the costs of, like, for example, if it's something that's mobile, the shipping and transportation.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's still some infrastructure that, you know, you need to make sure that that is available and that kind of thing. Maintenance on if something breaks down or something gets damaged, that kind of thing. So those are all really good questions, but I think that's probably something for us to look at too, if that was one of the ideas. Again, it's just an idea. It's not like Chuck's going like this. That's not necessarily where we're going in the direction, but when you guys are bringing up ideas, it's kind of like, oh, well, this is another thing that maybe would be a help or wouldn't be a help.
Evan, I saw you had your hand up a second ago. Don't know if you put it down or.
Sure. No, I didn't want to change topic. I think, you know, where Bridget was going is great, but I wanted to just call back to something I guess Bridget and Brian had both said earlier about how critical it is, you know, when we think about, you know, growers and the people that we're ultimately trying to serve with this group. You know, complementarity is really important because everyone we work with, everyone at least that Vineland has encountered, they're interested in almost like, what is the innovation chain from startup to commercialization, right? From bringing a new product from elsewhere into Canada, where do they insert themselves and what does that funnel progress towards? How does it progress? And I think since we're a working group, it would be great. Ontario, I mean, it's a large landmass, but really the functional area where we operate is not. If we could really have a regional mindset in coordinating your investments, because the money is so diffused and the activity is so diffused, that it would be really helpful to the growers if we could say, look, for certain stages of development, there are these lab resources, and then you move towards a, you know, open field capacity or Western Fair for certain stages of your development, to really, maybe this group could coordinate I mean, I hate to say a subcommittee of any sort because there's always so many in every job, but some way to talk about the importance of clarifying, resources and available tools and support for different stages of innovation, because I know, our organization is great for primary research related to this. And as Brian was saying to you, Bridget, I know you're relatively new. I think you were saying that Vineland has, it's a 200-acre experimental campus, really, right? I mean, we have orchards, vineyards, open field space, mushroom houses, greenhouses, vertical farm space, storage containers, robotics labs, soils labs, tree park. All of these things are available to everyone here on this call and to, people who are trying to develop new products in Ontario. And if there was a complementary next stage beyond primary research and testing and validation in that capacity, where they could bring it to Western Fair for a next stage, demonstration, or, I think it's really important to avoid diffusing attention and resources by duplicating. So I just want to really echo the importance, especially in a working group that has such collaboration as this. The complementarity, I think, is super critical for funding agencies and for the people we're trying to serve. So I would really, I'd love to help with that. I'd love to really itemize what we've got that everyone here has access to, and help you with, anything that we can provide to sort of ensure that money is being spent on like next step needs, right?
Sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Evan. Yeah, I think that's part of what obviously we have the priorities of the working group, but obviously making sure too that we're looking to see what the next steps are in the future, what's sustainable and that kind of thing, but without, duplicating anything that's already there, because the end goal is to make everyone successful in the industry.
Yeah, and I think, we could invite everyone here to come and tour, and then you can do an inventory. We can figure out gaps and then build on those. And I think it'd be excellent to almost itemize the innovation chain related to robotics across Ontario, clarify that, and then fill those gaps with the resources you might be compiling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's just a thought.
No, appreciate it. Thank you for sharing. Did anybody else have any other additional thoughts for this discussion question?
I think we got a good initial inflow of thoughts and ideas. I think we're probably good to move on to our second question that we had.
Okay. So the next question, sorry, I can hear my screen come back. So thanks everyone for that feedback. It's helpful to dive into. The next question, so this is the second question, and the last one is, when you think high level about the deliverables that make robots successful in Ontario, so more so just a simplified, like if we were going to sell an idea of something from either a producer standpoint or a company that's looking to get into it, what are your top 3 reasons that make that robotic system easy to adopt? And the reason for asking this is, as we kind of grow the working group and look to what the future model is for it, it's kind of making simpler one-pagers that's kind of, this is everything that we offer, but so that you can personalize that for if it's a grower, if it's a processor, that kind of thing. So looking to hear what your thoughts are from obviously your different background. Or is 3 too difficult to give? Because I'm open to that feedback as well. Is there one that's kind of this is like, so you guys mentioned previously the infrastructure in place, having the farmer to connect to, which is a big part of why this working group exists. Are those some of the big ones?
I don't know that we're ready, right, to, to kind of to go through that, right? Like there's so many places, and it really depends on, the farmer and the situation and the technology we're trying to do. Like it's such an open-ended question, right? It sounds simple, but it's not simple. I think that the reality is that if the problem that we're trying to solve for the farmer is really well understood, you know, and Vineland talked about a cucumber picking robot. You know, when you look at that, you say, well, the problem we want to solve is taking a cucumber off of the cucumber plant, right? That's a really well-defined task. So then you can sit there and now you can start to wrap some technology around it, and you can say, well, what size of cucumber at what time? You know, how do you damage it? You can start to generate that, and then you can say, how do we move that into a piece of technology that will work and make it easy to adopt because you've defined it. But if you go in there and you say, well, we're going to do weed control in a field, well, now we're starting to say, well, what crop, what soil conditions, what slopes, what weather conditions outside, what weeds, how are they rooted? You know what I mean? It just, you know what I mean? There's so many variables in that statement that it's hard to go through there and say, you know, how do you make that easier to adopt? So then we're into, you know, some general stuff, which is that, you know, the robot has to be super reliable. You know, the robot has to be easily understood as to what its limitations are and capabilities are. I think that is something that aids in the adoption piece. And then the third thing is going to be the farmer has to have some trust in that machine. And we had like in our conversations yesterday, it isn't that we had some stuff happen going on here yesterday at Bothell, but the discussion was, well, you know, farmers are not averse to adopting new technology. That's not what they're averse to. It's that the risk of that adoption is very, very high. And that it's the risk of change that's so high that makes them not want to try something new, because the cost of failure is it's their livelihood. It's what they're putting on the line. And so I think that's where, you know, that's where it's a very open-ended thing. It's hard to answer with a simple question, unfortunately.
Actually,
Yeah,
that's a good answer in and of itself, Chuck, because I mean, maybe instead of us saying, hey, this is what the working group can offer, we could say, if you have a problem, this is what the working group can offer for solutions, and these are the people to connect you to do that. And it's just flipping that PR piece kind of.
if you guys don't mind, I'll just share my screen for a second. I presented at something called Grower Day. This was hosted by Greenhouse Canada. I'm not going to go through the whole presentation, but the title is where are the robots, right? Because it's sort of, it's a lot of stuff out there, but you know, you don't tend to see it in practice. So what's holding it up? And I had this slide sort of just categorizing the challenges being faced, and you know, the top one really is cost and ROI, and making sure that's proven, and that goes side by side with performance. You know, Chuck mentioned trust, right? Early adoption, no one wants to be first, kind of thing. Reliability, which kind of covers just the fact that, you know, if you got something kind of risky, like our cucumber harvesting robot is designed in a way that it cannot tear down a whole plant. It cannot accidentally cut down a plant. So, and we've heard nightmare stories about technology that had to go way back to the drawing board because of that happening. And integration and making sure things fit into the rest of the system for a grower and so on. Also service and support. Growers have a lot of worry over that. You know, they're going to get the tech support as needed. And you know, this slide is more about the challenges that are often faced when you're developing the technology. But I'll skip over to this one here, where at the end of the presentation, I kind of highlighted some key things that we're looking at to really speed up the success. Obviously, you need a lot of validation and testing. So Chuck and the Haggerty team are going strong in that. We're ramping up more of that kind of service ourselves. We're thinking digital twins and simulation is also really critical. So if you can get good models set up, then you can get a lot of stuff done in the computer without having to wait for plants to grow. You can try new things more easily. Standardization, I put focus here. So that picture you can see here is our cucumber robot. but really our core intellectual property are kind of what's highlighted in red. We're not going to develop a robot with wheels and a robot arm. That's not the point. That's engineering. There's a lot of companies that can step in and solve that part. It's the vision system, it's the tool, it's how you integrate it together. So really maintaining focus on the parts of the problem that are the most challenging, right? To go and actually say, I want a mobile robot with wheels to drive around in a field, that's not easy necessarily, but it's there's a lot of work done in that world. And the last one is the one that I'm trying to focus a lot more on and get support from Vineland itself. So I've got sort of a program plan going through the system right now to get approval with a lot of focus on transformation, because what I learned in this cucumber harvesting project was that there are some really small things that are very easy for growers to do to change how they're growing the crop that makes it double-digit performance boost for the robot. Whether it's the way you're planting and spacing the plants out, whether it's the way you're maintaining them. And some of that is a big change, but some of it is a conversation with your staff to say, don't put the little plastic clips here because that gets in the way of the robot. Put the little plastic clips just slightly high, and all of a sudden everything's easier. So, any way to integrate that kind of mentality to say,
Right.
don't just try to parachute a solution into the field necessarily and try to fight to make the system work in the way that, with the way people are growing crops now. Look at what potentially can you change with the growing technique and the crop maintenance in order to make it easier for the robot. Because I've talked to growers and they're open to that. I've said to growers, what if I have a solution for you that will reduce your yield, but it's going to reduce your labor costs so much more that your profit goes up? And they're happy. They're fine. They look at that like, that's okay. I'll brag about my new truck. I don't need to brag about how many cucumbers or whatever I grew this year. So there's a lot of sort of advantages to looking at this slide here and maybe approaching the problem a bit differently than what a lot of companies are doing.
Well, I think, Brian, this is, in a lot of my presentations, I talk about a mindset change. It's just not about just the technology coming to it. It's about, is there, and I think asparagus growers talk about that, how, some of the other farmers, the way they grow carrots and these kinds of things, like some of those production techniques generate problems. And the only reason why those production techniques are used is because that's just what the farmer had.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no scientific or agronomic reason to do it that way. It's just that's what they've always done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like cucumbers grow on the ground, right? And then now we string them up in greenhouses. Someone decided to do that at some point, and yeah, there was an advantage. So it's sort of like, I envision in the future, and we have a program we're getting going, Greenhouse of the Future, and it'll be paired up with the Orchard of the Future and so on. That's going to look totally different. It's not just going to be the same thing as today with a robot in it and some AI. You're potentially looking at completely different growing techniques, and it's too much of an abrupt change to do it in one shot. Growers are not going to go and accommodate that necessarily. Although I have seen examples of a grower jacking up their entire greenhouse to get it to the height to do high wire growing at $15,000 an acre or something like that. So some of them will do some crazy stuff. But yeah, totally mentality change. Yeah, 100% agreed.
I like to use the example that I am certain that 8,000 years ago, when people started growing grapes for wine, they did not grow them how we grow them today.
Exactly.
Right. So it was done for a reason.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
Matt, you raised your hand.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, so to add to the question about what makes a robot successful in Ontario, just echoing some of the other comments, maybe expanding them a bit. Number one, for me, it has to be farm grade. So you got consumer grade, you got industrial grade, and then you have farm grade. Like as a grower, I spend half my life fixing equipment, even equipment that's supposed to be quite strong. So my appetite and interest in having something fragile on my farm is zero. So that is the first thing I look at. I look at it and I say, is how quickly am I going to? So that is number one. And then the second is understanding the farmer context. Other people have said that very well, so I won't add to that. And then the third is the speed, because for me, a robot, you're picking a technology partner, and I want a technology partner that can iterate quickly, because in a growing season, I can't, right? Like if it's May and I'm doing something early season on tree crops and something goes wrong and they need their code, if they're like, perfect, I'll get that back to you in 10 weeks, like I'm at a different point in the growing season and I only get one cycle per year. And so I need them super responsive in that part of the season so they can quickly iterate and refine issues. Because in the case of thinning or whatever, pruning, like I've got a very tight window and they're probably not always going to get it perfect on first cut. And I'm okay. I'm willing to accept that as long as they can quickly iterate and solve the problem while I'm still in that phenological window in my season. And that's where, like, those are kind of just recycling a little bit what other people have said, but maybe with a little extra flavor.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. And thank you everybody for your contributions to the questions. It's very much appreciated by all of us over here at the Western Fair. In the interest of time, we are coming close to the end, so I am going to sort of fast forward a little bit through the rest of the agenda. But of course, like we're always open to comments and discussion. Email us, call us, whatever. Like it's always open. We had a couple of events this week. There was the Robotics Application Conference, the Agri-Food Tech Expo Asia 2024 info session, the Applied Research Student Project Showcase, as well as the Manitoba 4-hour day at the Emily Innovation Farm. Did anybody take part or attend any of those and have a quick comment or two on how it went? Nope. All right. The next event coming up is the Grape Grower Demonstration Day on the 9th. And we did add a new event here last week in November. There is a Ontario greenhouse vegetable course provided by OMAFA. It's a mix of online lectures as well as in-person workshops. So essentially a crash course on greenhouse growing. So you can check out the link there if you're interested. Registration opens in October. We currently have no new funding announcements or opportunities to provide. There is we've got a collection of all brand new articles at the end there. So they're all new this week. So definitely check those out. And just for the last few minutes, it's sort of been a round table for most of the meeting, but I just wanted to get through the rest of everything else. So if there are any other notes or comments that anybody would like to go through, the floor is yours. We just had a comment from Garson that they opened their new competition this week at Kane. So if you want to head to kane.ca, you can check that out, and I'll add that up for the next week's agenda. If you did have any more thoughts or comments on Bridget's questions, we can circle back to those if anyone wants, or if not, we can call it a morning there. Oh, okay. All right. I guess with that we'll we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you again, everybody, for your contributions, your thoughts, and everything. It's always appreciated. Have a good long weekend for those that get to have a long weekend. For
All
those
right.
for those that don't, have a great regular old weekend.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Take
Thank
care.
you.